QROPS USA, navigating QROPS for US residents. Welcome back to the channel, guys. This morning I'm joined by our senior advisor, Jonathan Laws, next to the O2 in East London. Good morning, Jonathan. How are you?
Morning, Dominic. Yeah, not bad at all. It's another miserable day in London, but we're here.
Anything good on at the O2 coming up?
I saw Alien the other week in the cinema, which I'm still recovering from. But no, I don't think there's. No, I think everyone's saving all their money for these Oasis tickets, aren't they? So no, we probably won't be so busy.
All right, so today we're going to be diving straight into Malta's QROPS for US residents. So, John, my first question on my list. For our viewers, could you briefly explain what a QROPS is and how they work?
Yeah, so one of the kind of big misconceptions about QROPS is that they are in and of themselves like a product or a pension wrapper. They're actually, a designation given to a certain type of pension. And effectively what it means is, it stands for a qualified, recognised overseas pension scheme. What that really means is this is a pension scheme abroad that meets certain criteria. That means, HMRC, the UK tax regulator is willing to allow this to accept a UK pension transfer. So that's all it is. It has to follow similar guidelines, only access from 55, maximum tax-free cash amounts, gross roll-up, So basically, it walks and talks in theory, a lot like a standard UK pension would. It's just located overseas, with the idea being that a lot of people that move abroad, want to move their pension with them, especially if, they're completely cut ties with the UK and won't be returning. So yeah, that's kind of the big misconception is that they are in and of themselves a wrapper. They are, just a designation, and there are several QROPS, and some might be slightly different from others. Some in some countries, especially Australia being the big example, are incredibly different to what you might find in a QROPS based in, Malta or Gibraltar or Canada or wherever it may be.
Okay, so on to the next question, jurisdictions. Where are the main jurisdictions that QROPS are located in?
Yeah, so these days, if you're EU resident, the two main jurisdictions are Malta and Gibraltar. Malta these days is very much the main one. That's the one which has more flexible access, better mimics the UK. So vast majority of people in the EU or who transferred out to a QROPS previously, will find themselves in the Malta or Gibraltar QROPS. But there are also, other jurisdictions in which it's very prevalent to see QROPS with, the two main ones, really being Australia and Canada. And Australia is actually, very big because, all their superannuation schemes and stuff they have over there can get, a lot of them can get QROPS designation. So there's quite a big industry there about people getting into them. But otherwise, a Cameron James and the types of clients that come to us most often will very often be either in or asking about, a Malta QROPS, perhaps a Gibraltar QROPS.
So next question, why do so many people have QROPS? And in your opinion, why do so many people come to Cameron James asking questions about their QROPS?
Yeah, so, QROPS has almost somehow become the default option. If you live abroad, I don't need a UK pension, or I don't want a UK pension anymore. I'm going to go away and get myself into an overseas pension. And in fact, a lot of times, I'm dealing with someone at the moment with their pension. We want to transfer out. He lives abroad, doesn't actually want a QROPS, but he's got an overseas address. So here's all the QROPS information. So you've actually seen almost a push and guidance, whether it's a bit naive from some of the UK schemes about you live overseas, here's an overseas transfer pack. So, that's what eventually happened is, I lived abroad. I want to remove myself from the UK. I need a pension that's no longer in the UK. And that's why you see so many prevalent with them. Also, it hasn't been that long since, the proliferation of international SIPs came about. And it really was. I live abroad. I want to transfer my pension. You didn't really have anywhere else to go. It was going into a QROPS, or you were leaving it where it was. And most people didn't want to leave it where it was. Ipso facto, they've got themselves into a QROPS now.
And would you say QROPS are a good idea? And what are the benefits and drawbacks for anyone listening to this of a QROPS?
Well, like anything, if you put something in the wrong hands, it can end up being dangerous. QROPS have a very poor reputation, not necessarily for the actual QROPS themselves. They track they are supposed to mimic a UK pension. They're very similar rules. The problem is, previously they have been used and abused by the less scrupulous advisors and other kind of introducers out there, and have been effectively used to facilitate bad advice and all sorts of horrible things and horrible fees and stuff. So there is this kind of really negative connotation when you see it, but in fact QROPS can be a fantastic bit of financial planning. If you've got a really big pension, or you've got very specific reasons, or you're moving to Australia where you might be really good because of tax reasons, or you just might want to cut ties with the UK, and there are really ways you can do QROPS low cost, really transparent, great advice, great investment performance, walk and talks just like a UK pension. The problem is the vast majority of people, especially previously, haven't had that, and the reputation is poor. So the benefits are just like they would be inside the UK pension. With the other, the big kind of benefit previously in addition, was the ability to escape lifetime allowance. Once you're in, you don't have to, privy to paying it anymore in the future. However, obviously that's been mitigated by the fact there is no lifetime allowance now, so that's kind of been removed. But it does, you do remove your kind of exposure to any kind of changes in the UK, or certainly a lot of the exposure to any sorts of changes in the UK. As you've got a pension that's more, suitably located, especially if you're in the EU and you've got an EU pension, etc. Drawbacks are just like any pension. Or if you, depending on who you use as an advisor, that's why you've got to make sure you do all your due diligence, choose a good advisor, and you're not going to have any complaints. Most of the complaints about QROPS come from a bad advisor who missold them on something that they never should have been in the first place. I'm sure we'll go into a lot of that in this video.
Yes. So my next question is, what challenges do US residents face with Maltese QROPS?
Yeah, so it's a very broad question, and it can be quite hard to specifically answer because there's still so many grey areas. But effectively, from what we've seen and what's been posted out there, from official kind of tax authorities, is that the US tax authorities, the IRS, is not very happy with Malta, which is where the vast majority of those US residents who transferred into a QROPS now find themselves located. There are all sorts of questions around the original transfers themselves, whether they should have been not necessarily allowed, but were they taxable? There's a memo out there, I believe, from 2011 that kind of says, look, no, this is not good, you shouldn't have done this. But then there's also other kind of conflicting stuff out there that indicated they were okay. So the main challenges at the moment is that Malta is kind of not on the US tax authorities good boy list for this Christmas. They are, they've been caught being a bit naughty, perhaps, mainly to do with other types of pensions, and QROPS have kind of got caught up in that. But there are major potential tax and other pitfalls ahead for QROPS clients with US residents. Most of the QROPS providers don't want anything to do with a US resident. In fact, obviously, as I'm sure people watching this video know, if they live in the US, most pension schemes full stop don't want anything to do with a US resident because it's such a nightmare to deal with you. So you've got a situation now where, was the original transfer potentially taxable? Possibly. Seek tax advice. Was tax potentially payable whilst in it? Maybe. What about transferring out? What's that going to do? What am I going to do this? How do I keep the IRS happy? So there are so many kind of question marks out there now that face US residents that they didn't know going in. And to be honest, in the face of it, it doesn't look like the advisors that got them in the first place knew much about them either. Yeah.
And on that point then, to expand further then, so what would you say are some of the major pitfalls that could lay ahead for US residents who have QROPS, especially a Maltese one, for example?
Yeah, so the main kind of, the main sort of pitfall I see going forward is that you see all this scrutiny with Malta. Perhaps you're in a pension scheme or a QROPS that's run into some bother. or you don't trust the original advisor, all that kind of stuff. Don't blame you for all the kind of worries and skepticism scores. But the big problem is, you might panic and go, oh, I don't want anything to do with Malta. I don't want to tell the IRS about this. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. And you kind of squirrel out the back door, try and transfer it out to something you shouldn't, try to pretend nothing's going wrong. And actually a kind of, let's bury my head in the sand approach can lead to all sorts of potential tax and other penalties and all the rest of it potentially down the road. So, those are the kind of the major pitfalls that if you don't engage with the process, seek advice, both, financial and tax and what to do, you could find yourself, in a bit of bother, with various tax and regulatory authorities. So you've really got to, be mature in the response you take to it, and seek guidance before making any decisions that you might regret for the rest of your life. Unfortunately, that's how serious the potential issues could be if you get it wrong.
Mm-hmm. And without obviously sharing any client names, certainly first name and last name, could you share some recent examples of cases that you've seen or clients that have come through to you with sort of things like that?
Yeah, so we've had a lot of inquiries recently from US residents who've got a Maltese QROPS or even a Gibraltar QROPS who are, whether there's scheme issues or there's trustee issues, or just now realising perhaps there was issues that they never should have been advised in the first place. One of the other smaller issues you sometimes see, because I don't necessarily want to get into too many specifics about especially the ongoing cases, but one situation we did come across was a lovely lady, actually funny enough about 1 year ago today, who got in touch with us, lives in the US, husband unfortunately passed away, and she was inside the QROPS that had no survivors benefit. So he passed on thinking, oh yeah, we're going to pass on my pension to my wife and my kids in a nice tax efficient manner, and it turned out not to be the case. She had to take a giant taxable lump sum because of where she lived. That was fully taxable. Now, probably the definition of quote unquote first world problems, but she went from what would have ended up being a nice a retirement, a pot that would have lasted all of her retirement, and she'd have probably paid 20% tax on average. She ended up paying nearly 50% tax because she lived in California. And scrambling to be able to fund the rest of her retirement. So that's a big one. I've heard stories of clients who've come to us, having settled tabs and bills of IRS and other things for their QROPS and had all sorts of scrutiny from audits and this, that, and the other about lack of reporting. So we do have real case examples where clients have got into a tussle with the tax authorities over lack of reporting and lack of transfer issues, because from what we can see, we're not sure how they were ever advised to be transferred in the first place. Yes, it was true that back then everyone was advised to transfer into a QROPS, but I've seen a memo from the IRS in 2011 that seems pretty obvious and fundamental to me that this was a third party state and would incur all sorts of tax stuff. So don't know if that would be the case, and obviously go, and I'm not a tax advisor. I'm just saying if I was an advisor back then, I would not have been putting these things anywhere near QROPS. And unfortunately, that's the problem we're in at the moment, with several people sitting in a QROPS that they probably never should have been in the first place, and now obviously got to try and make the best of a horrible situation at the moment, but make sure we don't do anything that can jeopardize that.
Mm-hmm. And have there been any recent regulatory or legislative changes, I should say, that have impacted them?
Yeah, so the main so apart from the kind of IRS, Malta kind of butting heads stuff going on, which I'm not sure if you want to call that legislative terms, more about just actually kind of looking at the double taxation agreement in place and reviewing that. But one of the main things that came out in March 2017 was when they introduced this overseas transfer charge, and you either had to be resident in the local jurisdiction. Now, that completely cut off QROPS for US residents, and let's be honest, thank God, because that means we've not had another 7 years of misadvised or potentially misadvised transfers. So we haven't got a whole other host of people sitting in a QROPS that shouldn't be. So So, you want a piece of an example of legislation that had unintended consequences. There's probably thousands, if not tens of thousands of people, US residents who transfer the UK pension, sitting in a SIP right now, who would also be dealing with IRS issues and inside the QROPS had it not been for this, HMRC bringing in this transfer charge. But that effectively meant you could only transfer your pension if you lived there, or if you lived in the jurisdiction around there, or you still lived in the UK or Gibraltar. And obviously there are no QROPS in the US because if you've ever seen what the rules in the 401k or an IRA are, they don't track too well with our pensions over here in the UK. So there aren't any in the US, which means now people have been using UK pensions.
And what would you recommend clients do now, for example, if they stay where they are, or do they look at other options?
Yeah, so sorry to kind of quote Dad's Army for any of you out there, but don't panic, Captain Manning. You've got to make sure you keep a cool head, look at things objectively. It's very easy in a situation like this to reflexively want to do something or get angry or look at trying to do things and circumvent things. And unfortunately, what that's very likely to do is lead to a suboptimal outcome and really stick your foot in it again. So what you want to do is you want to try and engage an advisor who knows what they're doing. Preferably never sold one of these in the first place because they knew better. That'd be quite helpful. But also you want someone who can look at it, assess your options, make sure whilst you might not want to transfer out of Malta because that could cause another set of tax issues and this, that, and the other. You want to make sure, am I in the right pension scheme at the moment? We've had people, who've come to us, they're inside a pension, didn't realise about the death benefits, haven't been very happy about the way the trustees and the administrators have acted, didn't know about lack of flexible benefits and this, that, and the other. And we've kind of reviewed their situation and been able to get them into a much more secure provider. As we've mentioned, it's very hard for these schemes. They're not very keen on opening up for US residents, but if you have a good relationship with them, they know you're above board and you do really good advice, and everything you do is going to be in the client's best interest, but it 100% is. At Cameron James, almost compulsively, they will allow you and trust you to transfer someone in. And I think as of this time of writing, we're one of the few, if not the only one, who's actually been able to successfully get a US resident to transfer from one QROPS provider to another in Malta. We haven't left jurisdiction. We've got them into a nice, FCA regulated investment platform. So they are as secure as they're ever going to be. And one of the kind of the competing things is, why don't I just get it back into a UK pension? And again, tax advice, go through the formal advice process. This isn't the same for everyone. Yada yada yada. But one of the big problems, it's very likely that could cause is that's another taxable transfer. It looks like potentially, and all you're doing is kind of setting fire to even more of the pot than you already had before, and it doesn't really, the damage is done. The real damage was the initial transfer. Let's not make it worse by adding another transfer on top, especially as it would probably look a bit sneaky to the IRS if you're not disclosing it particularly well. So that's how we're kind of approaching it. See what it is. You don't have to action any advice we give. We'll always look at it independently, see what we think are your options, give you those 2 or 3 options, tell you which one we think's the best, cost it all up, tell you who everyone is, and if you want to action our advice, great, welcome aboard. If you don't, say the V. Compare it to another advisor. So, if you think they're better, go for it.
And can you give a couple of examples of recent cases that you've been working on with clients with Maltese QROPS? Yeah,
so obviously we had the one case. Is actually Midwestern, not a million miles away from where I went to university. Who was in a Maltese QROPS. It had he was in an offshore bond. He paid some of the most hideous commissions, unethical commissions. We're still paying them, 9 years later. I mean, that's how awful these things can be. We got them out of that. We reviewed the situation, said, right, let's get rid of this bond. Yuck. Let's get you into a, much more secure provider with much better reputation that isn't, as potentially under the cosh as other providers are from from regulatory authorities and tax authorities and all the rest of it. Let's get you onto an FCA regulated platform. Let's get you into a portfolio that actually makes sense, is evidence-based, is simple, and let's give you really good ongoing full fat financial planning and make sure we're giving you advice on what to do with all your assets as part of our ongoing advice service. And that's the really kind of poster boy at the moment we've got for dealing with that. Obviously there are loads of others who are potentially stuck where they are, certainly for the time being. We've got a few others who've actually left the US who actually returned to the UK and assessing the options there. Again, we'll always err on the side of caution, so we've kind of said, look, go get tax advice. Let's see if you have been removed to the UK, and do you have your green card? Don't you have your green card? Have you renounced your citizenship? Blah blah blah. Will all have an impact on one of the most suitable options going forward. So that's who we've really kind of dealt with at the moment. There's loads of people out there, but most of them unfortunately are kind of frozen at the moment, and we'll look to try and all we can do is kind of tell you what would you do in theory if you weren't frozen, and then once you are unfrozen, we'll go from there.
Yeah. And if somebody wants more guidance or wishes to start an advice process, John, what should they do?
Yeah, so first thing I do is get on YouTube. Don't watch Bring Me a Packers highlights like I do. Get on the Cameron James website. We've got loads of videos out there about QROPS and SIPs and all the rest of it. Both for US residents and just in general. So review that. We've got some really good blogs out there. Get in touch. You can go onto our website, go onto the link. I believe, presumably, we'll have. I think that's your job to advertise the links, but I'm sure there are links in the descriptions for you to book in, speak to one of our advisors, regulated advisors, to be able to help, but also speak to other advisors. We always encourage you get I think we're the greatest thing since sliced bread and the sun shines out of our backsides, but not everyone will agree with that. And you're not going to know that until you speak with other people. So get in touch, speak with them. Don't do anything crazy. Don't do anything rash. To keep a calm head. Get objective advice. I appreciate many people who've gone through this will not have the most trusting opinions of financial advisors, especially perhaps the one who originally did it or who worked for any of the firms that originally did it. But if you're there are a lot of good people out there who are willing to help. You just got to have an open mind and remember, you don't have to take the advice. It's a free advice process. And most things are nice when it's free. I usually say yes, so you might as well too.
Indeed. And yeah, just to echo that, you can drop us a telephone call, you can use the link in the description below. There's absolutely no charge for initial consultations. You can have almost as many hour-long conversations with Jonathan as you require, or anyone in our advisory team or myself, to get you to a point that you feel informed, that you want to make a decision. And even at that point, you can turn around and say, thanks, but no thanks, like the advice, but I'm gonna go do something else or whatever. So Jonathan, thank you for joining this morning. Enjoy the weather in East London, and I look forward to having you back on the channel soon.
Great, cheers, thanks for having me.
Thanks, John, bye-bye.